What those letters are on your desk. Now, who are we waiting for? Paletti? Damon? Is Damon here? No apologies. Only Hinari. Here he is. Hey, yeah.
Well, actually not with meeting.
Paletti?
Residents.
Has anyone seen Elwyn? Oh, Elwyn, you're back in the back seat. Back row. Very nice too.
So we're
Socially distancing. All right. Very good. All right. Well, it is 9 o'clock, so let's get started. Morena, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai. Councillors, lovely to see you. Welcome to the staff. Welcome to our guests from the airport. Great to have you with us today. I'd now like to invite Dave to come forward. Dave and Bob. Pastor Dave Connell from Ascend Global Church. Very warm welcome to you to start with our karakia. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you, Bob. Peyton, we have our waiata, and if we remain standing, we're going to sing Haere Mai. Haere Mai. We don't need the words for Tū Mai.
There's a few mates that are out on our maraes at the moment, one at home, one of the Haronga whānau at Waimarama Marae, and also Manu Verko at Waipatu. And Manu has been the kuia at Waipatu Marae for many years, and well-known kuia in Heretaunga, and she passed away yesterday. We got the pānui mate, so kei te tangi atu ki ngā tini aitua ngā mate, e pika chia nei e tātou tēnei wā no reire ngā mate haere atura. Haere mai toru.
order. Morena, Councillor Ollie. Councillors, just before we move into our agenda today, I would have a very, very special announcement, and some of us were with the celebration of the time that our Bill Blair has spent with our organisation, which has been in this building for the last, here he is. Come on up, Bill. Our superstar, and Bill says he's taking early retirement, and we're really sad about that, and he knows our roading network like nobody else does, and he's going to be hugely missed by not only this organisation but our people, because his attitude towards doing the best to fix every pothole in our district is quite extraordinary. He has a work ethic and a hard work ethic, and he is dedicated and to our people, and he has done some amazing jobs. He's answered some really weird questions about our roading over the years, and he's an incredibly respected team member of Craig and Jag and Adam's team. And we would like to take this opportunity, Bill, to wish you every best wishes with your family. We know you're moving out of the district to be with them, and we would just like to, on behalf of us all here, send you our very warm wishes for a very happy and long retirement, and we're very, very grateful for your tireless efforts and hard work for our people of Hastings. And here's a little something on behalf of us all, and Chief, do you want to say a couple of words too?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, just to reinforce Her Worship's comments, Bill, you know, a decade with us, and we proudly gave you your 10-year sort of pin on Friday, but a much broader contribution than just your time at council through, you know, a fantastic career. And I think listening to, you know, the staff and all of our partners across the contracting landscape that turned up on Friday, just clearly, you know, massively respected professional, great work ethic, awesome customer service, and, you know, and very, goes to your professionalism, but very generous in the way that you've imparted you know, a career that spans many, many decades in this field onto the staff and our young cadet, Caleb, who sort of takes over. And so, you know, we tease you about taking early retirement at not quite getting to 80. But, you know, do wish you, and I know your intention was to kind of work through until the middle of next year, but, you know, whānau's calling and you're heading off up to Cambridge. So it's just really, again, to reinforce a massive thank you for a huge contribution to Hastings, both through your time with the Hastings District Council, but also through your professional services career, and to wish you all the very, very best for your retirement with your family as you head off up to Cambridge. So thank you very, very much.
And yeah, 10 years. I didn't think I was going to be here for 10 years when I first came in. I was looking at maybe a couple of years, but yeah, circumstances for me have sort of made me stay a little bit longer, and I have really enjoyed it and enjoyed the working with the customers and also the wider community and the contractors and all. And I've had really positive feedback since I announced my retirement, and I was really amazed actually, because I thought I was just doing my job, but maybe I was doing it right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
We'll move on through the agenda. We have apologies received from Councillor O'Keefe, and great to see that Pam is now out of hospital, came out on Saturday and is very slowly recovering at home. We have any leave of absence. Any leave of absence? Happy to move from the chair that the apologies be accepted. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, carried. Just can I remind you, councillors, that if you are taking leave of absence, could you please email me so this can go through a formal committee for approval, and that's really important for us to understand who's taking leave and when. Confirmation of minutes. Conflict of interest. I just remind you your conflict of interest as we work through the agenda. Confirmation of minutes. Thank you. Councillor Kerr, seconded Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. And a very warm welcome, item 6, to the Hawke's Bay Airport to present the draft statement of intent. And a very warm welcome to Wendy, the new chair of the airport. And what a big time you will have. And we're very, very pleased to have you step up to this role, because, you know, we know that our airport board, will need you through the next 3 years at least. So very warm welcome to you both. If you wish to come forward and present the statement of intent, we will gratefully receive it. Welcome to you, Stuart. And can I acknowledge the challenging and hard times that you have been working through over the last 6 months, and been able to keep not only through construction and keeping aircraft flying from our airport, but also managing all the levels of the COVID pandemic crisis. So can I just thank you for the hard work that you've all put in to keep our airport in good shape as best it can be, and we look forward to your presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. And hello. Look, if someone had said to me 12 months ago that I'd be sitting here talking to one of our shareholders about an SOI based on 317,000 passengers for this year, I would have looked at them as though they were on another planet. But there you go, and here we are, dealing with exactly that. And I think it would be very remiss of me not to acknowledge that we have had a particularly challenging 12 months at the airport. We thought we recovered pretty well from the beginning of 2019 and the announcement of our construction company that they were going into voluntary administration. And we bounced back from that with a very clear mandate to Stuart and his team to basically bring that contract back in-house and manage it ourselves. We were tracking pretty well in that regard until November, and we had the announcement by Jetstar at very short notice that they were withdrawing airport services from Napier Airport, or from regional flights. And, you know, it's really easy to sit there and just look at the last few months and think about COVID, but actually the impact on our passenger numbers started back then. We estimated at that time that we were probably looking in the vicinity of 100,000 less passengers using the airport this year as a result of the withdrawal of Jetstar. And that's acknowledging that there would have been some people who would have chosen to transfer across to Air New Zealand, but a very large number of people, it just simply wouldn't be a viable proposition for them to continue to use air travel with Jetstar exiting. But I have to say that, again, Stuart and his team stepped up and we had a credible response to that. And we were tracking quite nicely in terms of our strategic objectives, and then COVID. And Stuart has a slide in his pack to just, I guess, give you an overview of the sudden and immense impact that had in terms of the operation of the airport. And that was particularly relevant in April. And just when we thought, you know, we were getting our head above water, then in March we had an announcement by Airways that they were looking to withdraw, or contemplating the withdrawal of services from the control tower, or resources from the control tower. And in itself, you might think, well, that's not as bad as the other three. But the reality was that it's yet another, I guess, distraction away from the core work that the team were doing. So over a very condensed period, we've had some of our most strategic risk realised and having to be responded to by our team. And in all that, I have to acknowledge, and I've done this before, but I'll do it again, I really want to acknowledge the support that we've had from all of our shareholders, particularly over the last 12 months. And it goes without saying the huge appreciation that we had in terms of your agreement to extend a $9 million loan facility to the airport. It's no exaggeration to say that without that, I don't believe the conversation we'd be having today would be focused on the SII that we've put up. More so, it would be about a decision that we would be forced to make in terms of suspending construction on the airport. So you can see the immense impact that that facility and opportunities that come with it have presented for the airport. I think before I hand over to Stuart, there's just one other thing I'd like to say, and that is that I'd really like to acknowledge the work of Stuart and his team, particularly over the last 12 months. Every time we've had a challenge thrown at us, Stuart and his CFO and his broader team have stepped up without question, and they've done that in a way that basically they've rolled with the punches. They've acknowledged that the reality of the situation, they've got a dose of realism about it, they've approached it in a positive manner, and they've always had an eye on recovery in the future. And so what you will see in the SOI is an alignment between the SOI and very much a strategy for recovery. It's our objective to return to be in the black, essentially in 2 years' time. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll hand over to Stuart, and he can give you a little bit more background and detail to some of the assumptions and some of the thinking behind the SOI that we've proposed, and then hopefully at the end of it, both Stuart or I can answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Marina.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, Whitney. So look, I'm just going to quickly move on, building on Wendy's point. I think this is just interesting to give some context. This is what our April looked like. If you look at some of the details, we had like basically 15 aircraft movements, 63 car park transactions. These are really small revenue amounts. That shows the magnitude of the impact that COVID's had on our business. I have to say we did have a good July, and we're probably heading into the break even, but we went from already 5 Auckland flights on an average day down to 3 flights per week in the last couple of weeks already. So it just shows you the impact that COVID is having on our business. Put this slide up here. This is a good background slide. It's really an airline metric, but showing the amount of miles times the amount of passengers that you're seeing globally. You can see that really deep V shape there that's impacted the whole airline industry. And what this really tells you is that you've got airlines all around the world, including New Zealand, that have got aircraft sitting parked up doing nothing, right? So the key point I wanted to draw out this slide really was that range of uncertainty. The next 12 months, it's very, very hard to predict where we're going to be, not just in New Zealand, but globally. They were talking about the Trans-Tasman opening up by, August, October now. They're talking about middle of next year. Qantas in Australia are not talking about international flying until about the middle of next year as well. So it's having a significant impact on the whole industry. I wanted to draw your attention to this slide. So the red line at the top is actually our pre-COVID forecast, and you can see the deep retraction based on what's happened since lockdown level 4-3 and our need to reforecast where we're going. So I have to say that I believe that our reforecasting work that we've done does absorb the recent sort of retraction again that we're seeing in the schedule. So it is a very conservative forecast, and that 317, let's hope that that's not our base, but we think it's really prudent to have that as our base just because of the complete unpredictability there is in the next 12 to 18 months. So I just wanted to touch a little bit in terms of revenue and our SOI looking forward. You'll notice that off that base year, the revenue actually takes quite a big jump up, and that's predominantly because we're in a resetting year for our aeronautical pricing. So we'll be looking to reset that in October with our airline partners. So we do expect with that price reset and some of the other focus that we've got on our commercial revenue to see, you know, quite a good increase in the revenues, aeronautical and non-aeronautical. I think during that period though, we've also allowed some assumptions so that we can start that enabling work on our non-aeronautical revenue streams. And that's something that you'll see figure in our discussion as we go through. Just want to talk a bit about cost as well. You've seen quite a lot around the industry that a lot of airports and airlines have obviously gone through all the same issues. We've reduced our operating expenditure moving into the new financial year by around about 30% of our sort of fixed cost base. Predominantly, just as we moved into the new financial year, we've done a bit of a restructuring. We accelerated the insourcing of our fire service. We've effectively disestablished around about seven roles and taken that opportunity to move the outsourced fire service in. Task protection services have been doing our fire services for over 20 years, so they are now directly employed by Hawkesbury Airport, which helps us to minimise that part of the cost. The other thing I wanted to highlight was our year-end expense base. I think we nearly came in on a profit, but you'll notice that we've taken out a 1.37 million right down of the terminal as we complete the terminal moving forward. And obviously one of our biggest challenges is the pressure on our balance sheet. Just about all our metrics have gone off the Richter scale, and that is one of the challenges that we see, especially when it comes to funding. Again, supporting, you know, Wendy's comment about our thanks to the shareholders for supporting the $9 million shareholder loan. We see that as we head into 22, we'll see those metrics start to move in a positive direction, but we believe that the recovery can potentially be quite a bit quicker than that as well. So I just wanted to quickly touch on our strategy. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's really reinforced the strategy that we set and reviewed at the beginning of the year. We agreed between board and management that this needs to be maintain our focus, but we're more an emphasis on partnership and property development moving forward. We've got to work to add that resilience to our balance sheet so that we're not highly reliant on aeronautical revenue, and that's a key message that we want to drill out as we go through this. In terms of capital expenditure, obviously as your passenger numbers retract and your aircraft movements retract, you would expect that the need for additional capacity in terms of things like aircraft parking and car parking spaces and that will also retract. So we've deferred some of that capital that relies on that sort of capacity growth. We've also made sure that we've maintained the capex that's necessary to keep the upkeep of our critical assets like our runways and aprons in there, and left in capex to keep progressing our property development and our master plan completion as well. I think we're all due for a big celebration after the year that we've had in 2020, and I can confidently say that the terminal will be opened in the first quarter of 2021, something that we're really, really excited about. If you've been through there, you'll see the new skyline starting to appear. The steel's going up quickly. At some point in the future, we would like to invite our shareholders to have a walk through the space to get a realisation of the scale and scope of that. And once you stand on the new slab, you really do get a sense of the size of the space. The other thing that we're really proud of is the work that we've done in partnership with like Samana Huriri, Mati Kanunu, Jacob Scott around that cultural overlay inside the terminal and in the forecourt. And we really believe that it will be a really special place for people when they're travelling through our region. It really is an important piece of infrastructure, and we remind everyone of the critical importance that, you know, every passenger coming through our terminal pushes more than $300 into the economy. So a growing airport is good for the economy, and it's a critical enabler. Just wanted to touch a little bit on the property. Obviously, we've put a lot of effort into our master plan, and we've reported on that in the past. This year we will actually see the publication of our master plan 20-year view. A core focus in that is to unlock the use of commercial land and to enable us to build on that revenue resilience strategy moving forward. That's something we've actually done quite a bit of work during the COVID lockdown periods on, and we're getting close to having developed a precinct plan that we'll be able to start to publicly communicate what our vision for that commercial space looks like in the long term. I just quickly wanted to point to this slide here. So fundamentally, the three key points around our master plan. First one is safeguarding our airport for the future, making sure that we can protect the runway length, future space for taxiways and apron and terminal infrastructure. That's point one. Two, to give us flexibility in our revenue streams as we grow the airport into the future. And three, really to set the long-term direction and vision for the airport, which you know that sustainability has become one of the things that's really fundamentally important to us, and we treat that just like safety. It figures in everything that we do now moving forward. I just wanted to point out those blue areas on that slide. Those are areas that over that long-term master planning period we would see could be further commercialised. And that blue square just below the runway is actually it's a to-scale example of what a solar farm would look like, which I'm going to talk about in a second. That's actually a 10 megawatt solar farm shown to scale there. So that's something that is part of our key revenue resilience strategy as well. This is actually, I don't know, this is like an old slide pack. I just realised that as I was going through it. I don't know how that happened, but it's fine. So I just wanted to touch a bit on our sustainability framework. We've rolled that out to our shareholders in previous communications. We've developed our Three Waters policy. We're looking about how the airport can play a much bigger role in the care of the estuary moving forward. We were very proud to have achieved level 1 carbon accreditation, and our aim this year is to move into level 2. And we've signed a partnership JV with Central Lines for the solar farm. The other thing I was just going to highlight there is you'll start to see some things like EV chargers and bike storage facilities pop up at the airport, because we know that that's important to the broader region. So I mentioned that we've signed the JV with Central Lines, something that we're proud to announce today. We've also signed up a technical partnership with Vector PowerSmart to further develop the solar farm to an investment ready stage. We truly could be the first carbon neutral airport in New Zealand, and from what I understand, we could also be the largest solar farm in New Zealand as well, technically. So in the next 12 to 24 months, we hope to progress that to a point where we can achieve that carbon neutrality goal. And we've also been talking to some other potential offtake partners, some other regional players that sit in the region that could benefit from energy supplied from a solar power grid. And our vision is to go to greater than 10 megawatt. We have the land to do it, and land that we couldn't develop on otherwise. I just wanted to finish on this slide really. again, something that we're really proud of is our team of ambassadors. We've, I have to say, they all wanted to come back after the COVID lockdowns. They were queuing at the door to come back and play their part at the airport. A highly resilient group of people that have played a big role in our customer service and taken things like service quality reports at the airport. But they're only one part of our community partnership. There's the sponsorship that we've supported many organisations, but also grown these relationships in a way that we can support these important regional events. But I wanted to leave one main thought, and I've said this in a number of forums. I think we've talked about the non-aeronautical revenue, but when it comes to growing our airport business, I think as a region combined, we need to do a lot more work in terms of how we grow air services into the future. So we've got a Hawke's Bay wide product that we can market, and the airport sees that it has a key role in leading some of that, likes of Hawke's Bay tourism and the various councils. But we think there's a window of opportunity, because just like we can get some negative shocks to the system, I think we're moving into a landscape where, you know, the network could reshape, the routes could reshape, the types of aircraft that are on the horizon could change. So I think we need to harness that opportunity so that as we move forward, we can grow, you know, the number of passengers and people coming for business and tourism into the region. So that's the final point I wanted to land on. We're up for growing that partnership footprint into the future. And on that, we can take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you both. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Chairman Wendy. Thank you, Stuart. I have a couple of questions, more just around challenging some thinking. I'm wondering about, in this new environment of COVID and the bumps that have happened along the way, how much of your time should be invested in business as usual, providing services to passengers, aircraft, versus some of these really exciting things, which I really do like, but the sense of a business park, carbon neutral, EV, solar. I'm just wondering, is there a risk that the board and the team takes their eye off what you're there to do and the funding that's required for shareholders? Please.
Want me to? So I think that was really that last point that I made about air services development.
Mm-hmm. Can you turn yours off? Sorry, I don't know why. I've got a second question for me. You're right.
Is that me on now? Sorry, I thought I broke it there. Yeah, that was really that last point that I was making about air services development. We definitely don't want to take our eye on that. In fact, we have been working in the background with a much larger airport who's got resources around forecasting, has the ability to leverage some of those relationships with the likes of Air New Zealand and other airlines. And that remains our core business. It doesn't detract from that. The terminal facilities, the work we've done on the car park and our ambassador programme, and also our route development programme is all part of just refocusing that core business. I think the main message though is that when you look at the performance of Hawke's Bay Airport relative to maybe some other airports and look at their revenue spread, we're actually vulnerable again to another shock like this if we don't diversify our revenue stream. So that's really the answer. It's a balancing act, I think.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up question? Thank you, Worship. Thank you. I'm very happy with that answer. My next question was, I think 2023 EBIT's about back where it was, yet passengers are only at 75%. I'm interested in why you think by 2023. Like, I know we have to look forward in the crystal ball and make some assumptions, but I'm interested in what you think is going to change between now and then.
So, another great question, thank you. Look, I think we've put a lot of work into our forecasting, and during the whole COVID period, we actually done a vast number of scenarios. We've taken what we see as the base with quite a negative view on it. But I think, look, the airline industry, if you look back in history and if you look at all the sort of deep shocks it's gone through, like 9/11 and SARS, etc., it's a very resilient industry. But my personal view on this is that you're going to see airlines come back with a slightly different response this time. And I really believe that the whole climate change narrative around sustainability will figure into how airlines respond to that. So you might see things like the hub and spoke model challenged, different routes appearing. I think we've got to be at the front of that, but I think we're confident that the industry will recover, and just like they did in 9/11 with security, we'll find new ways of, offsetting, like how we screen people from a health point of view and things like that as well.
Sorry if I could just add to that. Although timing in some respects has been a disaster for us in terms of these events happening, one of the upsides of timing is that at the moment we're not recovering all in terms of the landing fares. There's a regulatory formula that applies there. And at present, we're not recovering on our investment in the new terminal. So we're about to start negotiations with Air New Zealand. We will be able to recover that. And that was why it was so important for us to keep going with the terminal, because that's the ability for us to increase our revenue. So when you look at the numbers, yes, the passenger numbers will be less, but actually what we'll be moving to is a formula that sees recovery that we're not currently enjoying, and that will play through into that recovery, part of that recovery.
Thank you. Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you. I've got three questions. The first question is, are your current financial forecasts different to what was presented to Council when we agreed to the loan? The second one is non-aeronautical revenue streams. What is the driver for the value in the non-aeronautical streams? And thirdly, how significant in terms of revenue will the solar farm be, dollars and percent of revenue?
So let me start with the first question, and I have to remember them all in order. So could you just repeat your first question again? Sorry.
The first question was, are your current financial forecasts different to what was presented when we agreed to the loan?
So on that basis, look, during April, May and June, we did go through a number of cycling scenarios, which we're working pretty closely with the Crown on. And I would say they are a little bit more optimistic than they were when we first started looking at the shareholder loan. In the forecasts that we've accepted in our SOI, though, we have taken a fairly conservative base on that. So I would say yes, better, and the potential for, a faster recovery is there as well. The second question you asked was around what are the drivers of non-aeronautical revenue. So around, property development income is one predominant one. The airport has fundamentally in the past leveraged just like ground lease type commercial returns, whereas what we're looking to do is actually move into a space where we can do built development to increase the value to our balance sheet. Obviously that will be relative to the pace of our recovery in terms of what our balance sheet performance is like. And then in terms of the solar farm, look, we're at the early stage of that. Obviously we can get a ground rental recovery from land, but we're also motivated to become an investment partner in the solar farm project as it progresses. So we haven't done a lot of detail and modelling on what that revenue would look like. That'll probably line up with like year 2 and 3 our SOI. So after the next 12 months, we'll have a much better idea of what that revenue projection could look like.
And
Yeah, sure.
So just on a follow-up on the non-aeronautical revenue, is the revenue from property development independent of passenger numbers or reliant on passenger numbers?
Look, it's independent, really. But obviously it's relative to our balance sheet and our ability to borrow equity, these sort of things moving forward. So it's, you know, something that within 12 months we'll have a much better indication of what our ability is to invest directly in property development will be. But I think the main point, the focus on our master plan and property precinct is to set the tone of what that looks like moving forward so that we can have a clear direction on that strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. When these unprecedented times, and we're both in agreement, I'm sure, with that. I guess it's World War II was the last time air services stopped altogether. And I've seen, you know, the DC-10 groundings, global financial crisis, 9/11, nothing has come even close to what's happening. But I'm like you, I'm confident that there will be some return to normality. It's a bit hard to know when, but every other pandemic's gone away eventually, so I'm sure we will return to some sort of normality. But I have several questions I'd like to ask, all the same. The first one is, and you had a slide up there talking about 1 million passengers a year, which has been pushed out. I think it was supposed to be 3 or 4 years away. It's now 10 years away from the 500 odd thousand that are currently forecast at the end of the 3-year period, which seems particularly ambitious to me. I mean, passenger forecasting is what I did for a living, so I've got some understanding of this area. And that represents a growth of what, 8-9% a year. Something would have to change. We saw it with Jetstar, where we did get 50% growth over 4 years. And I just wonder what ingredients are likely to influence that figure to achieve such a huge growth rate. I mean, you've been advised by outside advisors, I saw that in the report, so I'm not digging into what you think, but rather what they told you.
Yeah, no, look, thanks, Councillor. That's a good question. I think when we've looked at our forecasts, sort of low, medium, high, that's probably on the high side of the scale. But based on our forecasts, it is attainable. And I think it comes back to your point about we've seen Jetstar enter the market and have a really positive effect, and we've seen COVID have a really negative effect. So is it foreseeable that in the next 1 to 10 years we could see another positive effect? Going back to my points about airlines' motivations to do things differently with different types of aircraft and look at the network and how routes work. You know, the whole hub and spoke model in New Zealand hasn't really been challenged. So I'm optimistic that the airlines, Air New Zealand, and maybe even a second competitor re-entering the market could happen in that 10-year period. And I would say that the environment for competition, especially on a low-cost model, is probably ripe right now, because that's where low-cost operators thrive. That doesn't mean to say that it'll be a Jetstar, but it could be a new entrant that we haven't looked at yet. So it comes back to the question about our core focus around growing planes and passengers, and that will always be maintained at the centre of what we're doing. It's an aspiration, and I think we want a growing airport business that's good for the region. So we think it's still an attainable aspiration.
I agree with many of the points you've raised, but I think it's still, there needs to be, I think we need to be told some of the assumptions behind it, because economic growth, population growth will not account for that sort of increase. But obviously you've had other advice. Now, one of the things I felt was missing out of the statement of intent, or wasn't emphasised enough, and this is something I've been pushing for a long time through Bruce, wherever Bruce is, over the back there, is trying to get a greater acknowledgement of the the contribution the airport makes to the broader Hawke's Bay economy and just how it does that. It is mentioned, I accept that, but I personally think the statement could be strengthened further, and I think the mayor's made a submission based on some work I did with Bruce some time ago, and I'd sort of like to see that built into your future thinking.
Yeah.
The next question is, I mean, you could answer it, but I think I've made the point. I noticed in there is an issue of reporting quarterly mentioned, which, yeah, it's a long time since we've spoken. And I just wonder, when are we going to start seeing these sort of quarterly reports, or will they not be to council? I couldn't quite pick that up.
Well, we do upload quarterly reports to the shareholders every quarter, so we can make sure that we get more visibility of those. On the point of the economic impact, though, I agree with that, what you said 100% actually, and I think, you know, we've been looking at discretionary and non-discretionary spend, and I think that work that we're talking around air services development, we would see that as forming part of that work to understand the economic impact of Hawke's Bay Airport moving forward in collaboration with the other shareholders.
Yeah, I guess it's a comment. I've got one more question, but we're very much in the clutches of Air New Zealand and always have been. And really, much of what happens will depend on what they decide to provide for us. Their fares to Hawke's Bay have always been very high compared to many other regions where there have been multiple airlines. I don't know if you can do anything about that. I don't need an answer. I'm just making the point. The last question I've got is indirectly relating to the solar farm and the other proposals. The councils, Napier and Hastings, of course, are essentially the owners of the land. And when the airport does well, the return of that is shared with government. In other words, to some extent, councillors, in my view, are subsidising the return to government. And this goes right back to the original agreement of 1963. And I just wonder, is there something we can do to start to remedy that problem? Or is it even in your thinking?
Sorry, what is the problem?
The issue is that you're proposing to build additional facilities, hangars and all sorts of things on what is effectively land owned by the councils. Councils put the money up originally for the land. But when there is a dividend, it is shared equally with government and the councils on a per shareholding basis. And I just feel that there needs to be an acknowledgement by the airport board and the government as to that inequity. And we need to somehow make sure we get a return for our ownership of the land.
I don't know that I've got an answer to that, frankly, because, you know, the shareholding is the shareholding. What we can do is try and generate or maximise the revenues that go back to all of our shareholders. I guess if you're talking about the specifics of the land, we have a perpetual lease on a peppercorn rental. I think there'd be a lot of work that'd have to go into whether that is the right model for us to work on going forward. I can't give you an off-the-cuff answer at this point around that, but I do acknowledge what you're saying.
Well, I mean, we would see the longer-term value in being, as we move into diversifying these non-aeronautical revenue streams, building up the balance sheet, and that would in effect give a much healthier dividend return back to shareholders, and increase the equity share. So that's the key point there. And just to finish, Simon, going back to the point about airfares and the relationship with Air New Zealand, something that's at the fore for us. But I think we've got a new Air New Zealand CEO, and I've heard him making a lot of noises about making sure that he helps to grow New Zealand's own backyard and support the regions through domestic travel. So watch that space. I think it's definitely part of Air New Zealand's strategic focus moving forward.
Yeah, I suppose I could just add the comment, in the short term, we're probably going to see a great emphasis on domestic because international is just looking so precarious, but yeah, that might change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Stuart. Just in terms of international tourism and international air travel, COVID has obviously created a huge pent-up demand around the world. People who want to travel, but they can't. And it seems that we might have a window of 12 months, 18 months, 2 years before that sort of flow comes through. Seems to me particular in Asia, and I'll mention China, which probably produces the biggest outflow of international tourists in the world. The current situation where two of their destinations, particularly America and Australia, are probably not the favour of the month. When those floodgates open, I would think New Zealand would be a very, very desirable destination for a huge influx of people. Are you talking to Hawke's Bay Tourism about this possibility?
Yeah. So we have a very close relationship with Hawke's Bay Tourism. In fact, we've had 2 or 3 workshops, including with Air New Zealand, and we're at the beginning of setting up an actual air services development work group, which includes Business Hawke's Bay, also includes Hawke's Bay Tourism. So we're actually looking at getting somebody to come and facilitate a discussion which will look at that point about, you know, economic impact, and also how we can leverage some of that, as you put it, pent-up demand. But I think we all seen what we call the sugar rush on the domestic, as you know, the school holidays and things like that as we came out of COVID. But I personally believe that the international demand that's all pent up, it will be a lot more controlled, because we've got a number of governments around the world that are absolutely focused on controlling the effects of this pandemic. So I don't think we'll necessarily see the same sort of sugar rush spike, but I do think we'll benefit from that capacity when it comes back online.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins, are you happy with the response? And I see that the one of the focuses, number 4, is to have that strategy completed by the 30th of August with the regional tourism body. Thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Nixon's point about quarterly reporting, can I just, the Chair of Ops and Monitoring, and Bruce, can we ensure that that comes back to our quarterly reporting, the airports tracking, please? Thank you. Great. No further, Councillor Barber.
Kia ora, thank you, Stuart. Thank you for your presentation. Hey, I've just got a question around your revenue assumptions. You've talked about deferring a charging per passenger charging mechanism change. You know, just under the current conditions, is it will that improve any way? You know, I'm just thinking how you actually make money from Air New Zealand. You know, are they paying a lease for their planes? That, you know, is that a fixed lease, or is it, you know, depend on numbers, etc.?
Just very, very quickly, we've typically had a landing charge, so for an aircraft landing, but we will be moving towards a per passenger charge later this year. So we've already gone through working out like what the consultation process will look like with Air New Zealand, and we've started that dialogue already. We also recover like commercial leases for like the Coral Lounge and Air New Zealand's operating space back of house and things like that. So I have to say positively that Air New Zealand have, you know, with all these commitments are in train, and the Coral Lounge that we're building is like literally 3 times the size, and during COVID they could have said, oh, we're wanting to scale it back, but they've actually maintained the size of the Coral Lounge moving forward. So I think Air New Zealand are committed to Hawke's Bay, and they see the same as we do, that, you know, we'll come out of this and they need to be ready for that sugar rush effect that we talked about.
concludes questions, and thank you, Chair Wembley and CE Stewart. Thank you for your presentation today. On behalf of us all, Councillor Nixon. Sorry. Oh, you happy to move? Yeah. And have a seconder, please. Councillor Strong. We wish you all the very best with the draft statement of intent, and going forward, we would like our shareholders to have regular updates actually on how you are tracking, just to ensure that what you're doing, how you're doing it, when you're doing it, just so they know, because it's really important how you put something for people to say. So thank you both today for your time. We're going to move in a second. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried.
Thank you.
Now I invite our Chief Executive, Nigel, to present his CE report to Council. Nigel.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, councillors, good morning. I'll take my report as read, but I really wanted to focus, I suppose, my reflections today on the government investment that's been made in Hastings. My CE's report was written before last week's announcement on tomato mushrooms and housing infrastructure, but between those two investments was another $36 million of Crown investment. So I think, it feels like a long time ago, but I recall the conversations that we were having as officers and councillors through lockdown about positioning a range of investment proposals for the Crown to support recovery from COVID. And so if you think back to June, only a couple of months ago, we had the first shovel-ready package announced, which was the $9.3 million of roading and footpaths and highway upgrades. And in June, we also were pretty excited about the confirmation of the new sort of 80-job MSD contact centre that was announced and started in July. But since that time, we have now had $120 million of funding approvals that go directly to investment in Hastings. And subject to your decision today on Three Waters, $40 million directly onto the council's balance sheet. Now, these investments span council, trusts, iwi, private enterprise, and cover investment in roading, Three Waters, port, housing infrastructure, aquatic and sport infrastructure, food-related innovation, rural hall upgrades, and employment and training programs. And I think it's worth reflecting that if you just go back 12 months and think about the investments that were made in Hastings place-based housing pilot, Hiratonga water security, food innovation hub, the municipal building, the Crown has now invested directly $160 million into Hastings. And I think it reflects, and I'd commend the Mayor and councillors on your vision and drive for our district. And I think importantly, the investment largely goes to the priorities that you've set for our community around safe drinking water, homes for our people, enabling infrastructure for our businesses and primary sector that are the engine room of Hawke's Bay, and jobs for our people. I do want to take the opportunity to acknowledge and thank the staff, because they have worked tirelessly over the last few months to advance a whole lot of proposals for investment, both for council initiatives, but also supporting our partners across iwi, business and community. So there's no doubt, I think, that we've positioned the vision for Hastings and a whole lot of innovative ideas that have been getting support in terms of government funding approvals. And the focus now is on delivery. On that, I'm encouraged. Whilst we have a really challenging program in front of us, I'm encouraged by the start that we've made. So if we go back to, it's less than 12 months ago, the government announced $12 million funding support for what was the Food Innovation Hub, as we know now is called Food East, is progressing really well. In that period of time, we've established the limited partnership company and board. We've secured regional investment partners. We've completed the purchase of land. We've secured a number of tenants, and we're on track for Food East to be built and operational by Q4 next year. In the roading and footpath package, we've used the new progressive procurement approach to directly engage a whole lot of our local contractors. They've taken on, at the moment, around 50 locals, and all of that work is progressing well. I think when we reflect on last week's announcement in particular, the housing co-investment package of $28 million is really significant. It advances a range of housing developments and, really important, a range of affordable and public housing developments and iwi and Māori-led housing solutions. We will be bringing a really substantive paper to Council very shortly around where we're at with the housing program, but more importantly, the opportunities that we can now advance with this significant investment. So, look, in summary, I thought it was reflecting on what has been an unprecedented level of investment into the Hastings community, and one that I hope that collectively between both elected representatives and staff, we can rightly feel Hastings proud of what we've achieved over a relatively short period of time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Nigel. And can I just take this opportunity before I take any questions or further comments to thank you and the staff for the hard work that has gone into actually achieving this funding. And it's not until, you're here day in, day out at night, still hearing you and your staff trying to work with officials, trying to get these applications signed off and across the line. So it is with a huge sense of pride that I acknowledge you all for your incredibly hard work. Attending the Mayoral Forum in Wellington with New Zealand mayors, I took for granted at the time that we were getting what I considered a government share for our region. When I saw how much we had achieved for Hastings, I realised that there's no way that the rest of New Zealand was achieving like we were and accessing this funding. And that comes down to relationships, it comes down to sheer hard work, persistence and tenacity, and it doesn't happen easily. And so I wish to thank you for your incredibly hard work over the last few months, and for me to attend the signing on of lots and lots of new employees with career pathways for life. It's all worth it in our partnership for both council and government, and to see the expression of excitement on these folks' faces who have never had the opportunity for a career path work in either construction or civil infrastructure. So thank you to you all. Now I move to Councillor Kerr, Councillor Nixon, Councillor Travis, Councillor Lawson.
It's possible we're all going to be speaking on a similar theme. So I too would like to thank Nigel and the team, but I'd actually like to jump back 2 years ago, Your Worship, and address the councillors and yourself who led us through an amazing chief executive appointment process. But what was most amazing and most special is, as a group of councillors, we were really united in what we wanted to achieve in the terms coming in front of us. And led very well by Your Worship, brought in by everybody. The new councillors have also come on board and we're still driving in the same direction. And it's really exciting that just over a year ago we appointed Nigel, and wow. So I too would like to acknowledge the work that you've done, Nigel, the heart that you bring and the skills and knowledge. And then that flows down to the amazing leadership team. Many that were here as you arrived. Acknowledge them as I look around the room. It's a pretty impressive team that you have, and then flowing down through their teams and into the staff. And I've yet to come across a staff member that isn't aiming to achieve all of the things we've achieved. And one other thing I'd like to acknowledge is the COVID response of our organisation. It's been both inward as we've looked after ourselves, our staff and their families, but it's also been outward as they've looked out and looked after our community. So I too would just like to add my thanks to you, and can you please make sure that the comments in this room are spread through the organisation, because it is heartfelt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, like the previous two speakers, Mayor and Councillor Kerr, yeah, I think it's been a great job by yourself and the officers. But when I think back, when I say but, I mean, I've got a question coming. Yeah, it was because we worked so far ahead, and some of the projects that are happening now, God, I mean, they go back 5, 6, 7 years from memory. They go back an awful long time. And our success has really been because we were so well prepared. We had lots of hopes, we just didn't have enough money to make them happen. And the current crisis looks likely to go on for a while yet. And so I guess my concern is, are we making sure we still have a string of shovel-ready, if I can use that expression, projects in the pipeline that we can stretch or contract the timeline for, depending on government's needs, because our needs are very attached to their needs. And I presume we are drawing that up, because I don't see anything quite as extensive as we had when we went into this crisis.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nixon, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, the short answer is, whilst we've been pretty successful, we haven't got everything that we wanted across the line, and I don't think we've got any shortage of a whole lot of good ideas for our community across, a number of different areas. I think that we are probably very much at the tail end of the announcements from the current government, and part of, I think, the focus now for all of us, I think, over the next period of time is a little bit of one, consolidation and delivery on a pretty significant program of work that I think will continue to build the reputation that I think Hastings across the council and a number of partners that we have a strong vision, we have a lot of good ideas, and we can deliver on those ideas. And basically, to answer your question, Councillor Nixon, the short answer is yes, and we'll be watching post-election. We're aware that the current government has provisioned $20 billion that's still sitting in a contingency, and as we kind of have to stay live to what's happening in our community and our economy, we will continue to advance a whole lot of ideas, and I think there's no shortage of ideas that we have in various stages of being worked up.
That's great. I'm not looking for the details, I just wanted an assurance.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Councillor Travis.
Like everybody else around this table and in this room, I do also share an immense sense of pride at what has been achieved and what is going to be achieved. But I was deeply frustrated this morning listening to national radio. I'm not sure how many other people heard that, but there was a story about Hastings' place-based approach, and while it was mentioned in the story that the date for the completion of the first 200 houses was mid-2021, the lead was only 12 houses have been completed, with very little acknowledgement of the fact that there was a total COVID lockdown, no buildings were going to be built, and we're still almost a year away from completion date. It was politically skewed, it underestimated what has been done and what is going to be done, and I'm wondering how we as a council, because we're one of the key players in this area, how we can front foot it, call this reporter, whose name I have here, to account and say, come and jolly we'll have a look and see what is being done, because I just thought it talked about the Hastings Housing Register growing at exponential rates and focused more on the negative than anything positive that has been achieved. And frankly, it made me grumpy.
Yes, I share your grumpiness. I haven't heard the Radio New Zealand piece, but I understood it took a particular angle. I suppose standing back from that, and I reflect that yesterday, part of how we've run our Hastings place-based pilot is it is a pilot that brings together all of the partners in the housing space, government agencies, providers, council, iwi. We had our governance group meeting yesterday. We meet every fortnight and we have a program plan against everything that we've signed up to deliver, which is 220 houses by mid-2021. And I think, notwithstanding the way that sometimes get reported in terms of the partners in housing, government that's made a big investment, the simple facts are we are on track with a housing program that will deliver 220 houses. And it is a program now with the investment that's being made and with the government's decisions through the budget to allocate X billion dollars and another 8,000 public houses, even more housing. So notwithstanding your grumpiness, Councillor Travers, at the way it's been reported, I think in terms of substance, all of the partners, including government as a major funder, are well aware that the Hastings place-based program of work is on track.
Thank you for that. And can I just ask our comms team, please, to follow up with perhaps the facts as the Chief Executive has just spoken about, and the delivery not only of our partnership with the Crown, but our general housing place-based plan for Hastings. Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really, I'm just going to reiterate what everybody else has said. You know, a lot of what we read can be quite dry, but when I read that report, honestly, it was just so impressive. So congratulations to all the team. And, you know, I can't say how much it was a joy to read. And I hope that, yeah, it is passed down to everybody who was part of this. Thank you.
Councillor Lawson. Councillor Barber.
Yeah, kia ora, Nigel. I just want to tautoko the mihis that have been given to you and the staff. As I mentioned to you on the phone, my one of my sons starts next week as a civil works cadet with Top Line. We're working out of Waipatu, but you know he really lacks kind of self-confidence, this boy, and you know he kind of you know this has come at a really good time for him, because you know he's probably has a tendency to kind of, you know, wander and stuff. So, you know, I think about many of our young Māori, especially, that are going to be coming onto these projects. I think, because I said to him, hey, you know, it's not just a job, you know, there's lots of those around, but this has got a bit more focus around getting you into a career path, getting you some training and things of that nature. So he's really excited. You know, make sure you get your CV, you know, everything in there, and you know they're putting them on their pathway. They had a wānanga at the marae last weekend, and there was, you know, all the staff out there. They had bouncy castles for the kids, this for the top line workers. So yeah, you know, it's great for the community, and having a real you know whānau experience of that, and how that, you know, early days. Hasn't actually started his first day at work yet, but you know we're keen to see how he progresses, and yeah, I think it'll do some great things. So mihi ana ki a koe, Nigel, tira ki ngā staff and ngā kaimahi katoa, and to the councillors that have you know put in the hard yards in terms of supporting this direction. This one question is has there been a wash up of the regions? How much the regions have been able to get from government, you know, compared to population? Because, you know, it would be good to see where we kind of place.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Barber. And the short answer to that is yes. I'm going to give you a spreadsheet today of all of the publicly available information as it relates to the investment in Hastings and broader Hawke's Bay, and we also have that by every region in the country. And I think it would be fair to say that yes, Hastings has done well on a per population basis. Probably not as well as Northland, or you know, Rotorua is probably done as well, if not slightly better than you know, Hastings as well. But we have certainly you know, attracted a good level of investment, and I think to your point, good on you, boy. And that's the stuff that you know, when you strip all of this away, you know, this is about the vision that we have for our community and the people in our community and jobs. And I know, again, it's early days, but the thing that I've been really encouraged about, and again, this is all new for us, and I really want to acknowledge Craig and his team, the approach that we've taken around getting this work out the door, and the way that we've designed this work and the way that we're working with our local contractors. I've been super impressed by, probably shouldn't be surprised, the way that our firms have bought into Yes, there's some direct engagement and some work here, but their commitment to taking on locals, and we had the opportunity of meeting with Mike and the team from Higgins last Thursday. So he was just sharing that they've recruited a whole lot of staff. They haven't deployed them yet to Waipari, but they've deployed them onto other jobs. He said, I'm probably going to have to go back to Annie and get some more because they're basically so good. The other crews don't want to put them onto the onto the Waipatu job. Seeing people like call them dodge contracting, who's really excited about, taking on all these locals. We've seen drainways, not in this package, but with the TRT pipe work. They've taken on a smaller number of staff, but permanent all year round commitment. So we're just seeing a whole lot of firms really buying into the underlying kaupapa, which is backing locals and supporting our locals into really good jobs.
Thank you. Councillor Shodham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I acknowledge that council process is that the minutes from this meeting are recorded based purely on the recommendations. None of our other comments will be recorded, and as such, reading the appreciation and the aroha that's in this room, I would like to amend the recommendations for this particular item to say that council receives the report titled Chief Executive's Report to Council and acknowledges the hard work and successful advocacy of the Hastings District Vision to achieve significant central government investment by the Chief Executive and council staff. That way, our appreciation is formally acknowledged.
Thank you, Councillor Shodham. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Travis. Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yes, this is certainly stunning for Hastings. It's going to see us a long way ahead of the pack as we move through these projects. But all of this funding actually comes with a huge workload for staff, and we're accountable for the completion of all of these projects. I'm wondering, how are we tracking as far as staffing is concerned, and what do we need to do to ensure that we meet our obligations and our expectations?
My question exactly.
Thank you, Councillor. Very good question, and one of the conversations that we will be having in due course with Council. As you're aware, all of this investment comes to deliver a range of really important things for our community, and what we're having to look at is how do we resource within that investment the staff, the program management that we're going to need to sort of deliver this work. So that will be a conversation that we have with councillors, but clearly when you're looking now at the scope of work across multiple fronts. So again, I'd like to use Graham Henson as an example. Graham's doing a fantastic job as our director of our water improvement sort of projects. Got a massive capacity for work, very motivated around getting stuff done. But you sort of look at that space now where concurrently you've got urban water treatment upgrades, small community water upgrades, Cape View Corner, Te Wonga revetment wall extension, H18 collective, all happening at once. To your point, we're going to have to look at some of the resourcing to deliver this work. Otherwise, we will run the risk of sort of wobbles and just too much on. So it's going to be a really important conversation shortly.
Can I suggest we do it sooner rather than later? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Well, I'll have a mover and a second. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Item number 8, this is the Three Water Stimulus Funding Agreement. And this, if I can just give a bit of an overview, our council has been working since 2017 on safe drinking water strategy for our 80,000 residents, and we're in the last, well, pretty much the last year of that delivery, 1 year to go. Over the last 18 months, though, as a region, we knew that we needed to look at the three waters differently because our aquifers, our stormwater, our rivers, our sea doesn't know local government boundaries. And it's really, really important that we work together to look at how we can improve the delivery of our three waters. So this paper today, we were incredibly proud to be the first region in New Zealand to be acknowledged by the government because we'd undertaken a 3-water review, which you've all been part of, and to look at ways in which we can move forward under the government reform. So this today is a memorandum of understanding to look at our future, our direction. As you can see in the paper, the government says if you opt in, you can opt out. We're in this very, very strong process of getting the work done now, and on the 4th of September, you'll all meet all the other region's leaders and discuss the 3 waters, both reform and review, together. So as Hawke's Bay delivering. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the reform, and I just wonder if Craig, Mr. Thude, would you want to add anything to what I've just said? Bit of a background.
Your Worship, you've worked through my bullets, so take questions.
Any questions on this paper? Councillor Sears.
Just a comment, if I may, Your Worship, at this point. Just to say how supportive I am of the signing of both the MOU and the funding arrangement. I think it's an exceptional opportunity from government to opt in with such big financial incentive, but to have such an easy opt out with no financial repercussions. Actually, what I like most about the MOU is, I think, the underlying kaupapa of good faith, and I think an intent for us to work in the very best way, collaboratively, for the best outcome for water, and separate from us looking to our own small boundaries and perhaps even the work we've put in ourselves to open ourselves out to be really inclusive to all our neighbours, our neighbouring councils and their people, and the water, of course, that runs through all of our district. So I'm encouraged by the Chief Executive's comments in his report that we have capacity and capability. We'll hold him to that. I'm very excited to take the money in to work with our partners who I hope have the same enthusiasm to work with us in a way that will get us the quickest and best response for our water and for our people. And I would very much like to move the recommendation if there's no more questions.
Thank you, Councillor Sears. We have a mover. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sholem. Councillor Sholem.
I was just going to move.
Thank you. Councillor Barber.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. I think, I definitely support the recommendations to sign the MOU for this first tranche of funding. But I think, looking at the bigger picture of what the reform is trying to achieve, and there will be lots more discussion as we go through the iterations of tranche 1, 2 and 3. But, in terms of the council, this council is the council that had to weather what happened in Havelock North back in 2015, 16. Anyway, so for me, it's about making sure that don't happen again, that when you turn the tap on, you know that there's going to be safe water. The second thing is that the water that comes out will be affordable. People can afford to pay for their water rates. And the third thing is that people that haven't had water in the past will have access to water. So for me, half of Waimarama can get water, the other half can't actually get water. There have been issues down in the northern end of Waimarama for years about accessing safe water. So I think there's an opportunity here for councils to look at the big picture. And for me, organisations that concentrate 100% on one kaupapa 100% of the time, you would think would normally get that thing right. Whereas councils, we've seen our agenda, the the width and breadth of kaupapa that we need to support. Yeah, I think sometimes we might miss the mark on a few things. So certainly having the opportunity to sit in many of these meetings with the committee, the steering committee, the intent is good. You know, that was one of the things that I was very interested in, was where the intent was from government, and from what I've seen, is it's certainly to support our people, our communities, to have safe, reliable drinking waste and stormwater when we get down to that. So tautoko, and I'm keen to see how we go into the next 2 years, but certainly year one, yep, support it.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Barber. And our share of the 50 million is certainly very welcome in terms of managing our affordability for our ratepayers. So we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on to item number 9. This is the COVID Recovery Contingency Fund, and it's pretty self-explanatory. This is, instead of coming back to council for some small items to support various groups and organisations and communities. Any questions? Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship. After a slight refresher with my question, if possible, I recall that during lockdown, a group was formed, a rapid recovery response group, which had a number of councillors on it who met to discuss applications into the COVID Recovery Fund. That's been disbanded, is that correct?
Well, Councillor Dixon hasn't needed to do any more work on that. So
haven't had any further requests?
No further requests, except the one that we did for the sport and recreation fields. But there wasn't a requirement for the committee to reconvene. Is that correct?
So if that hasn't been formally disbanded, and as I understand, it could meet quite quickly, it wasn't a formal council meeting and resolution required, can that group not be used as the mechanism for these smaller funding requests?
I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Mr Chair, you happy to reform and manage this 50K?
I didn't know what Councillor Strong was going to say, but I had a similar question along those lines.
Okay. So we can just add that to the recommendations?
Yeah. I absolutely agree that we need some mechanism to allow haste around the access to the recovery fund, but I am also keen to still see that oversight. So if we can amend the recommendations,
Thank you.
I'll leave the wording to you.
Okay, thank you, Jackie, if we can just all...
And I'm happy to move that.
Just add that. Okay, well, I will just take a couple more questions while Jackie's following that up. Councillor Dixon?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. My comment was, when we had the Rapid Response Fund, it was transparent, it was independent, and it made considered discussions. And I was a bit concerned when I read this. The decisions may open up HDC to favouritism in some brain, but doing it this way, it's transparent. So that's why I agree with that sort of recommendation coming forward.
Great, so have a mover and a seconder when we get to the recommendation.
I don't mind second the recommendation.
Yeah, great, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. And perhaps that group, when they reform in some way, what I was interested in was really around the mechanics of it, and having seen what Napier City Council has done with theirs, which actually has a formal online application and the like, you know, was that something that actually we would look to do? I think there are those in the community that I've had conversations with that don't know that that fund is there, nor what are the realms or the things that they can access, and you know, and put together a pitch or a proposal to it. So it was just around those mechanics, and perhaps that's something that we should, as that committee, discuss.
Yeah, I'm certainly welcoming of the idea of councillors having oversight. I think the intention was in this space, obviously, there was the $1 million contingency that was put aside for COVID recovery, and obviously, allocation of 150,000 to support the retail sector and a group of councils overseeing that. This was more around, and I take the point around transparency, and I think it's really good if a group of councillors can do this, was if I use an example like in terms of the Rural Community Board saying in terms of supporting the rural community, we're wanting to run a small amount of events and town halls that are going to cost $3,500, not wanting to bring that back as a formal paper every time, but a mechanism for, I think there's probably, to your point, Councillor Harvey, a different question about, in addition to community grants and that, what's the council's thinking about actually inviting groups in to apply, because we haven't kind of made those decisions about the balance of the COVID recovery fund at this stage.
Yeah, so I think that, I just don't, I think that we probably, let's see if we've got that committee still formed, because that's a piece of work to look at changing what we have got, and rather than, so we just, we need to put some criteria and some function around it so we can deliver it.
Can I just respond to that, please? Yes, I really wasn't referring to any small amounts of money. It was around some of the larger ones. And one of the examples of Napier City Council was that a business support was able to provide business support to their local businesses. And that was just the Ice House, I think, was the one that was able to do that. And I just thought that, we had allocated or made an announcement around a sum, but, it is really an economic stimulus package in some way for local businesses and stuff, or associations to tap into. And I just wonder whether we needed some new thinking around that going forward.
Yeah, just to sort of follow on from your comments, Councillor, I guess what Council has established so far really is a contingency fund, without any parameters around it, other than it was the COVID recovery contingency fund, should it be needed. And so I guess, if there was a desire around the table for more work to be done in that space, if there was a need, it's certainly something we can sort of work on and bring back to Council. But at this stage, it was really just a contingency reserve in case it was required.
Thank you, Worship. It almost seems like we're talking about two different parts. For example, I think it's Marcus, who's a Rural Community Board member of Pokawa, was asked for $200 to run, or it might be $500, to run an afternoon tea or something for his community. And from my point of view, I can't see the benefit of pulling together a council subcommittee to approve that. And the way I read this was granting the chief executive an ability to make those small decisions. So a total quantum of 50,000. And I completely support that, but I also support the other conversations around, for the balance of the fund, do we need to consider, do we want to go out and promote it and spend it? Or have we finished with that fund? So I actually don't agree with the new recommendations, and I'll propose I can't remember what it is, it used to be a notice of motion, but it's anyway, that the recommendations are A and B as they're listed, and C is consideration be given to future use of the balance of the contingency fund. So some work is done around the several hundred thousands that are still left there. Because I can't make a judgment call today on whether we should proactively spend that or not.
So I think, but it's just before I take the last two speakers, can I just ask the Chief Executive really to give us some direction around this, because there's certainly a way forward, and perhaps you could just give some clarity on that.
Well, I'm just wondering if, one of the issues that's been raised is around, we're looking not to clog up full council with papers that go to small amounts, but also thinking about the role of the Civic and Administration sort of committee that's dealing with grants all the time, is whether perhaps the cleaner way is just to delegate this to civic and administration, where I think Councillor Kerr, that can meet regularly and often does on sort of matters. And then I think, a judgment, Your Worship, whether you want to, direct civic and administration or somewhere else to give some thought also to, what broader application of the COVID Recovery Fund might, pick up some of those questions about the approach to, whether you want to take a more proactive approach to.
So I think that today we'll focus on the 50K, and I think that way forward is, and I think that we need to, as a council, look at what we do in terms of the wider view. So today we're going to focus on these recommendations here, and perhaps if I have the Councillor Sholem, Councillor Ollie, but pretty much we have a direction here today for this. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the first thoughts, Chief. To keep Ms Evans on her toes with recommendations, I do wonder if I certainly support Councillor Kerr's item C, although I like the amended recommendations that I've put forward. I do support formally putting forward a recommendation that we do further work around the overall contingency fund. That way, at least we're formalising that we will be having that discussion in whatever form that takes. I'm incredibly conscious that we find ourselves back in level 2 when we as a country had probably become quite confident that we'd stamped out COVID. So we don't actually know what the future is going to bring, and it could well be that the remainder of that contingency fund is very much needed for later down the track. So I definitely think we should wrap some formal process around that to make sure it's not whittled away, and then we find we suddenly are in great need of it. But equally, I absolutely take on Councillor Kerr's comments around having really worthy causes coming forward, just needing a couple of $100. But I think if we have that oversight and that transparency around it, that's going to give our community peace of mind.
Thank you. So we're just going to add that we'll look at any further allocation of the COVID fund in the future. So have we got a sort of a direction? Councillor Ollie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In support of Damon's question as well, this is kind of a comment and a question in relation to the Rapid Response Fund and other funds alike. My question is, what is the process of getting that information out into the community once funding becomes available? And also my other question is, who is responsible for getting that information out into the community, to the people? That's my question.
So we started off with a formal process, but now, as Councillor Harvey's pointed out, that there isn't a formal process for the COVID Recovery Fund, the $1 million we set aside. So that's what we'll look at, and that's what we captured in the recommendations. In terms of the community, what has happened is that people have, just as you've heard from the rural community, come forward and asked for some support for rural afternoon teas and things like that, and people have just come forward, and that's why we thought, well, we need to actually put a fund aside to manage this instead of these little dribs and drabs coming in all the time. So it's going to be a proper process now. Councillor Dixon, through his Committee of Civic and Administration, will hear those applications and administer as they see fit through that committee. So that will be the process. But at the moment, it's pretty much, where the need has arisen, we've responded. So, with the fees for sports grounds and things like that, we've responded as the need has arisen. Councillor Dixon?
Yeah, thank you, Wish. I just wanted clarification of the recommendations that we're going to vote on. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The $50,000 fund be allocated to Civic and Admin subcommittee to allocate for any grants received, and that a further recommendation that consideration be given to the future allocation of the balance of the contingency fund. So that's the $1 million.
The mover and second are comfortable with those recommendations? Okay. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. The two, right. Or 15 minutes. Short break. Please be seated, thank you. We've got quite a bit to get through. We're moving on. We resume our meeting now, moving on to our item number 10, the appointment process and remuneration for an independent member of the Risk and Assurance Committee. Mr Allen, did you want to add anything to your paper?
Thank you, Your Worship. Happy to take the report as read. Council has previously agreed to a second appointed member to this well-functioning committee. And so just wrapping some process around that appointment.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Sholham.
Thank you, Your Worship. This all seems to make sense to me. My only question is around, aside from Councillor Nixon and Mr Nichols, who else is on the appointments committee? Councillor Travers?
No.
No, that's all the appointments.
Okay.
It's the chair and the deputy chair and the mayor.
Okay. So my suggestion was going to be around whether or not perhaps including a couple of more people would be advantageous. Understanding that you're on there, Your Worship, I was wondering about Councillor Travers, which is interesting that Councillor Nixon pointed at her. I don't know if Councillor Travers...
I take your point, Councillor Sean, but I don't think that's necessary. The appointments panel will take the direction and the lead from the staff. This is very much a technical appointment. This is someone with a great deal of asset management experience that will add value to the Risk and Assurance Committee. So it isn't actually about governance, it's about the direction from the staff, finding the right person to help the committee.
Okay, so that answers my other question then, which was around the technical side. So direction will be given to the appointments committee by staff, but ultimately it'll be only those who are on the appointments committee that make the decision. Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
Sorry, can I just add, just to clarify a point, the appointments committee will make a recommendation back to council, so that'll be the closing of the loop. But there will be a process in there where the likes of Mr. Thu and myself will assess applications, work with the chair and deputy chair of Risk and Assurance, create a shortlist and interview a very short number of candidates and put a recommendation up to council.
Councillor Nixon.
Whoops. I almost fell off my chair. I think it's mostly about know-how. That's the criterion, so that's why we're sort of going the way. I'm happy to move it anyway. Before I move myself off the floor.
Any against? Thank you, that's carried. 11. Now we have the changes to appointments committees, subcommittees and external organisations. There's just been a few changes there. Any questions? Councillor Nixon? Are you finished?
Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Redstone? Happy to move. Thank you, Councillor Redstone. Have a seconder. Councillor Barber?
A question, Your Worship?
Yes.
A Maranui Refuge, which is possibly what Jackie was going to say, Landfill Joint Committee, would be preferable if there was an alternate. Wouldn't be called on very often, I'm assuming, Anne. I would rather not do it, but if nobody else can, I can fill that role, having been on that committee. But I would rather somebody else do it.
I think you've got enough, Deputy Mayor. They're on a lot of work and you've got a lot going on. So in your days and your weeks are long. So if there was an alternate, somebody else put their hand up for that. As the Deputy Mayor said, you won't be called on too often. Anyone volunteering? Thank you, Councillor Lawson. So if we just add that, do you want to add that into the recommendation? The alternate will be Councillor Lawson. Thank you. We just add that into the recommendation for the mover and seconder. Thank you. Great, thank you. So you've got that. Ms Evans? Thank you. All right. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's sort of, it is relevant, but also the Active Transport Committee still needs one councillor appointee to it. So if there's anyone that's also interested in that, perhaps that comes forward for the next council meeting to be. One, I haven't talked to anybody about that.
So how many?
No, I'm the chair of it, but then there is one space for another council. It's a broad community subcommittee, so those with active transport interest are participants in it.
Yes.
I'll just put my hand up.
Is there anybody else who would like to be part of active transport? So that's, making sure that the kids get to school safely, all those school plans, it's all our cycleways, it's really interesting work. It's largely with the community that Councillor Harvey chairs, and so the community have big input into this, where the next cycleway will go, all that sort of, work. All right, no volunteers at the moment, so Councillor Sholem, thank you. Okay. All right. You've been doing a bit of that work yourself anyway, Councillor Sholem, with the schools. Okay, so we'll add that into those recommendations. So that's the Active Transport Committee and the Aramara, the Refuge Landfill Joint Committee. All right, I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Excellent. Right, item number 14, and this is the recommendation to exclude the public. Could we just, some of the authors of these papers, please explain to councillors the reasons why we're recommending these papers be moved to public excluded? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. So both papers refer to third parties, so the recommendation to public exclude is not to prejudice their commercial and business positions.
Thank you. Any questions? Happy to move from the chair. Have a second to Councillor Kerr. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. We now move into public excluded.